The first encounter expanded. It was a slow afternoon in early spring. The kind of afternoon when the sun isn't too bright, the breeze is soft, and the world seems to move at a quieter pace. He had no special plans for the day. After finishing some routine work on his laptop in the morning, he decided to take a walk. Not for any particular reason, but simply to be outside. He didn't have a destination in mind, just a desire to stretch his legs and let his thoughts wander a little. As he walked along the sidewalk lined with trees beginning to bloom, he passed by a small local bookshop he had seen many times before but never entered. The kind of place with tall glass windows, wooden shelves, and a quiet charm that invited you in without saying a word. Something made him stop that day. Maybe it was the weather, maybe it was the way the sunlight touched the edge of the window, or maybe it was simply that he had nowhere else to be. So he stepped inside. The faint smell of old pages and fresh coffee welcomed him. The wooden floor creaked slightly beneath his steps. There were no loud sounds. No music playing, just the soft shuffle of pages turning and the occasional quiet voice between staff and customers. It felt like stepping into a slower world, one that didn't rush or push or shout. He wandered between shelves, occasionally picking up a book and reading a few lines before placing it back. Nothing grabbed him right away. But he wasn't in a hurry, so he kept walking. At the far end of the shop, near the small poetry section, he saw someone standing quietly. A woman. She wasn't doing anything particularly noticeable. She wasn't laughing loudly or dressed in a way that drew attention. She was simply holding a book in both hands, reading the back cover with a calm focus. Her posture was relaxed, her clothes simple and comfortable. A plain, long-sleeved top, jeans, and shoes that looked like they'd walked more than just sidewalks. Her hair was loosely tied back, with a few strands falling over her cheek. She occasionally brushed them aside without thought, her eyes still on the book. He didn't know why he paused. She wasn't the only person in the shop, but something about her presence made the space feel a little quieter, a little stiller. It wasn't attraction in the way people often describe it, not a rush, not butterflies, not a wave of excitement. It was more like a moment of noticing, like hearing a familiar sound in a new place. There was no intention behind his gaze. He wasn't trying to start a conversation or imagine a story. He just stood there for a while, watching the way she read slowly, with the kind of focus that felt unforced. Like she wasn't trying to get through the book quickly or show that she was deep or intellectual. She just liked being there. She placed the book back on the shelf after a minute or two and turned slightly to look at another one nearby. Her face was calm, not happy or sad, just quiet. She looked like someone who was comfortable being alone. Not lonely, not bored, just content. That struck him more than anything else. In a world that often runs fast and loud, she stood still and soft. He looked away before she noticed him. He didn't want to stare. He didn't even fully understand why he had been looking. He walked to the next aisle, picked up a random book, and pretended to read. But his mind kept going back to that small moment. Not because of how she looked, but because of how he felt near her, calm. A few minutes later, she walked past him toward the exit. She didn't notice him. Oh, maybe she did, but didn't make anything of it. He watched her as she left shoulders. Relaxed, steps unhurried, the doorbell above giving a soft chime as it closed behind her. That was it. No words exchanged, no smiles shared. Just a quiet presence in a quiet place. He stayed in the shop a little longer. Not because he was waiting for her to return, but because he needed a moment to process what he had just felt. It wasn't something big or romantic or dramatic. It was just something real, a small moment that had touched something in him. He walked back home that day thinking about how rare it is to feel calm in someone's presence without even knowing them. How strange it is to notice peace in a stranger. And how often we rush past moments like that without paying attention. For the next few days he went on with life as usual. Work, errands, phone calls, the quiet routines that fill our days. But now and then his mind would drift back to that afternoon in the bookshop. Not to her face or the book she held, but to that feeling, that stillness, that strange awareness. It had stayed with him, not like a memory of something important, but like the gentle scent of a place you once visited and liked. Even if only for a few minutes, he didn't think about seeing her again. The world is wide, and moments like that don't always return. But something inside him had shifted. He started paying more attention to the quiet people around him, the ones who don't speak loudly, who don't rush, who move through the world gently. He started noticing how often peace comes in silence, not noise, and how being drawn to someone doesn't always begin with desire or excitement. Sometimes it begins with stillness. With calm, weeks later, he found himself passing by the same bookshop again. He hesitated, wondering if he should go in. He smiled to himself, realizing he didn't expect anything. He just wanted to be in that space again. Not to chase a memory, but to step into that quiet world once more. And maybe, just maybe, feel that calmness returned not from her, but from himself. From what that one simple moment had reminded him of, that sometimes what draws us isn't appearance, noise, or performance, but peace, presence, and stillness. The calmness around her expanded. A few days passed after that quiet afternoon in the bookshop. Life moved forward in its usual way. The days were not especially busy, nor particularly exciting, just ordinary, as most days are. He returned to his regular rhythm, a morning walk, work on his laptop, replying to emails, making tea in the kitchen, and reading now and then. Yet somewhere in the background of his mind, the memory of that woman lingered. Not in a loud way, not with obsession or longing, but as a quiet echo that stayed with him. He didn't expect to see her again. Cities are large, people are many, and meetings like that are usually just once. Still, one late morning, while running an errand, he passed by a small public library. It was one of those quiet places tucked between two busy streets, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. On a soft impulse, he decided to step inside, not for any real reason. Just a feeling. The inside was peaceful, low voices, clean wooden desks, tall windows with soft daylight falling in, and people reading quietly. He walked slowly past the shelves, stopping occasionally to read the spine of a book. And then, without meaning to search, he saw her again. She was sitting at a table near one of the windows. A plain notebook in front of her, a pen in hand, and a closed book resting to the side. She wasn't looking around. She wasn't doing anything unusual. Just writing something in her notebook with small, slow movements. It was the second time he had seen her, but it felt different from the first. This time it wasn't surprise or curiosity, it was familiarity, like recognizing a calm place you once visited and liked. He didn't stare, he didn't approach. He simply found a spot a few tables away and sat down, pretending to read. But his eyes kept returning to her, not to analyze or evaluate, but to observe how calm she seemed. There was no rush in her hands, no restless tapping of the pen. She would pause often, look outside the window for a moment, then return to writing. A line or two. She didn't seem to be checking her phone. In fact, it wasn't even on the table. That, in itself, felt unusual. He began to notice other things, too. Her breathing was steady. Her shoulders were relaxed. There was no tension in her neck or hands. She wasn't bouncing her knee or shifting in her chair like so many others often do. Even the way she turned a page was slow and smooth. There was no performance in her actions. It was just how she was, calm. After a while, she packed her things. Slowly, placed her pen carefully inside a cloth pouch, and closed her notebook gently. She stood, adjusted her bag on her shoulder, and walked out without any sign of hurry. He didn't follow her. He stayed at his table, holding a book he hadn't opened, thinking about how calmness like that seems rare today. Not because people are bad, but because everything around us pushes us to move quickly, speak quickly, decide quickly. She, on the other hand, was choosing something else. Over the next few weeks, they crossed paths a few more times. Not in dramatic or romantic ways. It wasn't fate, just coincidence. Or maybe it was that both of them lived within the same quiet circle of cafes, bookstores, and parks. The third time he saw her was at a small cafe known for its peaceful atmosphere. She sat at a corner table with a cup of tea and a book, not scrolling through her phone, not chatting with anyone, just sitting there, reading quietly. Her face had no makeup, her hair was tied back simply, and she wore a soft beige sweater with worn-in jeans. She looked like someone who dressed for comfort, not impression. He ordered a coffee and sat a few tables away. Again, not to stare or intrude, but because being near her felt ... not exciting, not romantic, just peaceful. There was something about her presence that made the whole place feel softer. She wasn't loud. She didn't smile for attention. She just existed gently. And that gentleness affected everything around her. In the following days, he began to notice that his own energy changed in places where she happened to be. Even if she was just a few tables away, he felt himself breathe slower, feel less restless. He didn't feel the need to check his phone. He didn't feel the urge to talk. It was as if the space around her carried a kind of stillness that invited others to slow down too. He wondered if others felt the same. He began to think about how many people we meet who are full of motion, noise, opinion, and how rarely we meet those who simply hold space quietly. He never told anyone about these moments. It wasn't something worth explaining. He wasn't in love. He didn't even know her name. But her presence had become something he looked forward to, even if their paths didn't cross often. It made him pay attention to how much noise he carried in his own life, how often he rushed, checked, swiped, and replied just to fill time. Being near her made him want to sit still and just exist for a while. One late afternoon, he went for a walk in the park. The sky was slightly overcast with low clouds and a gentle breeze. He followed the same path he often took past the benches, the pond, and the children's play area. And once again, without looking for her, he saw her. She was sitting on a bench alone, facing the pond. Her hands were resting in her lap. She wasn't doing anything, just watching the ducks move slowly across the water. He took a seat on a different bench nearby. Not too close. He didn't want to disturb her. He just wanted to sit and enjoy the view. For a long time they both sat in silence, facing the water, without exchanging a glance or a word. And in that quiet, something inside him settled. He didn't feel alone, even though they weren't together. He didn't feel invisible, even though she hadn't looked his way. Her presence was enough. That day he realized something deeper. His attraction to her wasn't about appearance. It wasn't about fantasy or desire. It was about the calm she carried. The kind of calm that feels safe to be around. The kind of calm that doesn't demand attention but invites stillness. She lived at her own pace, in her own rhythm, without trying to control the world around her. And that quiet confidence, not loud, not proud, was what drew him in. Over time, he noticed that this attraction didn't grow louder. It grew quieter. It wasn't a crush. It wasn't a dream. It was like a slow-moving river beneath the surface, deep and soft. It made him want to slow down too. To speak less, listen more, and be more present. He started walking without headphones, reading without multitasking, sitting in cafes without scrolling. And strangely, these small changes made him feel more alive, more peaceful. He never tried to plan their meetings. If he saw her, he saw her. If he didn't, that was okay too. He didn't need her to be anything other than who she already was, a quiet presence in a noisy world. And every time he saw her, even from a distance, he felt reminded of something important. That calmness is a kind of strength. And that being near someone who carries peace within them can change how you carry yourself. Asterisk. A simple conversation, expanded. It was a Saturday morning, the kind that begins slowly. The sky was pale and quiet. Not bright, not dark, just somewhere in between. He had woken up earlier than usual, made tea, and sat by the window for a while. There was no plan for the day, no list of tasks, no pressure to be anywhere. It felt like the kind of day meant for walking, for being outside without rushing, without a destination. So, after breakfast, he stepped out into the stillness. The park near his apartment had become a familiar place. He liked its silence, the sound of leaves in the wind, and the slow rhythm of people passing by. It wasn't a crowded park. Just a simple space with benches, trees, a small pond, and walking paths. On this day, the air was cool, and the breeze was soft. As he walked past the pond, he noticed someone sitting on a wooden bench near a tall tree where sunlight came in gently through the branches. It was her. She was sitting in her usual quiet way. Not reading, not writing, just sitting. Her legs were crossed at the ankles, her hands resting loosely on her lap. Her gaze was forward, not fixed on anything. She looked peaceful. As always, she wasn't doing anything special. Yet her presence seemed to soften the space around her. He slowed his pace without realizing it. Then, almost without thinking, he turned and walked toward a nearby bench. It was close, but not too close, just a few feet away. He sat down. The wood was cool from the morning air. He leaned back and looked at the trees. For a few minutes, neither of them said a word. The world around them moved gently, people walking dogs, birds flying low, leaves rustling. It was one of those quiet moments that feel full, even with nothing happening. Then, to his surprise, she looked over at him and gave a soft smile. Not wide, not deliberate, just a quiet smile, as if to say, "Hello," he smiled back. And in that moment, something shifted. Without pressure, without plan, they acknowledged each other. "Nice weather," he said. His voice was low and calm. She nodded. "Yes, it's peaceful today." That was it, a simple beginning. Not clever, not deep, just real. He didn't try to impress. She didn't try to entertain. They were two people in the same place, speaking without a goal. It felt natural. "I like coming here," she said after a pause. "It's quiet. People don't rush." "Me too," he replied. "It's the kind of place that makes you slow down, even if you didn't plan to." She nodded again and looked back toward the trees. They sat in silence after that. A silence that didn't feel heavy or awkward. It was the kind of silence that feels shared, like they were both thinking the same thing without needing to say it. After a while, he asked, "Do you come here often?" "Sometimes," she said, "usually when I need to clear my mind. It helps me breathe a little better." He liked that answer. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't for effect. It was honest. "I think we've seen each other before," he said. "At the bookshop and maybe the library." She turned her head slightly and smiled again. "Yes, I remember." That surprised him. He hadn't expected her to notice. She didn't seem like the type who watched people. But maybe, like him, she simply paid attention in a quiet way. "I've always liked that bookshop," she added. "It feels timeless. You walk in and everything slows down." They talked for a little longer. About simple things, books they liked, places they enjoyed walking, why they preferred quiet spots over busy ones. Their words came slowly, with space between them. There was no rush to fill silence, no need to keep talking. Sometimes one of them would pause for a long time before speaking again, and the other didn't mind. It felt like a conversation carried on by shared stillness more than by words. He noticed how she spoke, not loudly, not softly, but with a kind of careful thought. She didn't try to say impressive things. She wasn't trying to be funny or interesting. She just said what she meant. And when she listened, she gave her full attention, not the kind where someone waits to talk next, but the kind where someone really hears you. He found himself relaxing more with each passing minute. His shoulders dropped. His hands rested loosely on his lap, his breathing slowed. He wasn't trying to be liked. He wasn't performing. He was just being the way she was. At one point, they both went quiet for a long while. A group of children ran past, chasing each other. A bird landed on the edge of the pond and drank water. The wind moved the branches above. They just watched. "You don't talk much," she said gently, turning to him. He smiled. "Neither do you?" She laughed a little, not loudly, just a soft, genuine sound. "I guess that's true. I think it's nice," he said. "Talking only when it feels real, not just to fill time." She nodded. "Me too." That moment stayed with him, not because of what was said, but because of how it felt. Two people sitting quietly, speaking only when there was something to say. No pressure, no game, no trying. Just presence. Eventually, she stood up and looked at him. "It was nice talking with you." "You too," he replied. She gave a small wave and began walking down the path, the same slow pace as always. He watched her go, not in longing, but in calm. He didn't feel like he had lost something. He felt like he had experienced something, a rare kind of moment that happens when two people meet as they truly are, without masks, Without effort, as he sat there after she left, he thought about how rare that kind of conversation was. Not because it was deep or meaningful in a dramatic way, but because it was honest, simple, and calm, no performance. No exaggeration. Just two quiet people sharing a peaceful space and a few real words. He realized that this was the kind of connection he valued most. One that grows not out of loud feelings, but out of shared stillness. One where you don't feel the need to impress or entertain. One where silence is not uncomfortable but welcome. That night he went to bed thinking about how something so simple could feel so full. A soft conversation on a quiet bench, no expectations, no plans. Just a moment shared between two calm souls, and in a world filled with noise that felt more meaningful than anything else. Her way of living expanded after their first real conversation on the park bench. Something changed, not in a dramatic way, but in the kind of way you only notice when you slow down enough to feel it. He began to notice her more clearly. Not because he saw her every day, but because when he did, he paid quiet attention to the little things. The way she moved, how she acted when no one seemed to be watching, and the choices she made in small, unnoticed moments. They didn't talk often. Not yet. But they would see each other now and then at the same cafe, the park, the bookshop, or sometimes at the library. Their interactions remained gentle, a smile, a soft hello. Occasionally a few words exchanged, never rushed, never forced. But even in those brief interactions, he began to understand something about her. She lived differently. She didn't live for the spotlight. She didn't seek attention. She didn't seem to be chasing anything, and that was rare. Most people, himself included, had spent years running after something: success, approval, validation, more. But she seemed to walk through life without that pressure. Not because she didn't care about her life, but because she knew how to simply be in it. One morning, he saw her helping an elderly woman cross a narrow street near the bookshop. No one else noticed. She didn't draw attention to it. She didn't take out her phone. She didn't even wait for the woman to say thank you. She just smiled, helped her across, and walked away like it was the most natural thing in the world. Another time, at the library, she sat across from a young student who seemed frustrated with his homework. She noticed. After a while, she leaned in and quietly offered help, not as a teacher, but as someone who genuinely cared. He watched from a distance as she explained something patiently, her voice soft and encouraging. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't being loud. She was just being kind in the most quiet, consistent way. He started noticing even more. She picked up litter when she saw it, not making a show of it, just doing it. She spoke to shopkeepers with genuine respect, always using their names if she knew them. She waited her turn without checking her phone, without showing signs of impatience. If someone bumped into her, she smiled rather than frowned. If she saw someone struggling to carry a heavy bag, she offered help. She lived slowly, deliberately. Not in a lazy way, but in a peaceful way. She did things with intention. She read books one at a time. She walked at a natural pace. She didn't try to pack too much into her days. She wasn't afraid of being alone. In fact, she seemed to enjoy her own company. There was a morning when they both ended up at the same cafe. It was quiet, with only a few customers sitting at scattered tables. He was already there when she arrived. She saw him, smiled softly, and chose a table a few steps away. They didn't talk right away. She placed her order, sat down, and took out a small journal. No distractions, no noise. Just her and the page. He watched her write slowly, pausing, often to look outside the window or simply sit still. She didn't rush to fill the page. She didn't check her phone once. She seemed completely present. As he sat there with his coffee, he realized how unusual that was. How rare it is to see someone truly living in the moment without trying to prove it. Eventually, she looked over and said gently, "You come here often?" He nodded. "It's a good place to think," she smiled. "Yes, that's why I like it." Too. They shared a few more words, but as usual, the conversation didn't last long, and that was fine. With her, silence never felt empty. It felt comfortable. like a kind of understanding between two people who didn't need to fill every space with words after she left. He sat for a while, reflecting on her presence. What made her different? What made him feel drawn to her in a way that was so quiet yet so steady? It wasn't beauty, though she had a natural kind of simplicity that was easy on the eyes. It wasn't mystery, though she was thoughtful and private. It wasn't charm, though she was warm and kind. It was something deeper, something more steady. It was how she carried herself when no one was watching. It was how she made small, intentional choices. It was how she moved through the world without needing to prove anything. Her life wasn't filled with grand gestures, but it was full of small truth acts of kindness, respect, stillness, presence. He remembered seeing her once on a rainy afternoon. Most people were rushing down the street holding umbrellas, avoiding puddles, looking down at their phones or complaining about the weather. But not her. She didn't carry an umbrella. She had on a light coat, her hair tied back in a loose knot, and she walked slowly through the rain like it didn't bother her. She paused under a tree for a while, watching the raindrops fall from the leaves. She smiled as if the world had offered her a soft moment. No one else seemed to notice, but he did. And again, that moment stayed with him not because of what she did, but because of how she did it. Over time, without knowing it, he began to change. Not in big ways, but in quiet ones. He started walking without his headphones. He sat longer in silence. He smiled more at strangers. He slowed down during simple tasks. He didn't rush to fill his calendar. He read books with more attention. He started treating time differently, not as something to fight, but something to befriend. He didn't do this to impress her. In fact, he never told her. But being around her, watching her live in such an honest, quiet way, made him reflect on his own habits. He started asking himself simple questions. Why do I hurry? Why do I need noise? Why do I try to prove things that don't matter? She never told him how to live. She never gave advice. But she taught him something through the way she moved through the world, that you don't have to be loud to be strong. You don't have to be known to be full. You don't have to fill every space with words or images or movement. Sometimes, just being is enough. He saw her one evening sitting on the same park bench where they had first talked. She was watching the sunset. Her face was soft in the golden light. He walked by quietly, not wanting to disturb her. But as he passed, she looked up and smiled. He smiled back. That was all. And in that small exchange, he felt something clear inside him. This is the kind of life he wanted to live. Not noisy, not fast, not filled with endless performance, but calm, present, meaningful in the quietest way. And somehow, without trying, she had shown him that. Realizing why expanded, the days continued to pass quietly. Nothing big had changed, and yet everything inside him felt different. He hadn't fallen in love in the way movies or books describe. There had been no grand gestures, no racing heart, no sleepless nights filled with obsession. What he felt was deeper, calmer, and far more grounded. It was a kind of silent understanding that had grown over time. It had started the day he first saw her in the bookshop, and now it lived with him quietly. Like a soft light that didn't flicker or fade, he had begun to feel more settled in himself. Not because he had reached any final goal, but because something about being around her had taught him how to be still. He wasn't chasing anything when he was near her. He didn't want to become someone else. He didn't want to prove anything. He just wanted to be present the way she always seemed to be. And slowly, that presence had become the thing he admired most about her. One evening, as the sky turned a muted orange, he found himself walking along the same tree-lined path where they had first shared words. The park was quiet, touched by the soft colors of the setting sun. Leaves shifted gently in the wind, and the air carried the smell of earth after a short rain. It was one of those evenings when the world seems to slow down naturally, without effort. He sat on their usual bench, the one near the pond. He didn't know if she would come that day. It didn't matter. He just wanted to sit for a while in the quiet. A few children were playing at a distance. A couple walked by, holding hands and talking softly. A dog barked in the distance, then went silent. He sat, breathed deeply, and let himself simply be. After some time, he noticed her walking along the path. As always, her pace was slow, relaxed. She wasn't dressed to impress, just a loose sweater, soft pants, and simple shoes. Her hair was tied back casually. She looked exactly like herself, the same way she always did. There was no mask, no performance. She noticed him sitting on the bench and smiled gently. He smiled back. She didn't ask to sit. She just walked over and sat beside him like it was the most natural thing in the world. They didn't speak right away. They watched the sky together, listened to the quiet. Their silence wasn't empty. It was full of understanding. After a while, she spoke. "You always seem calm when I see you," she said softly. He turned his head slightly. "I think I've been learning it from you." She smiled, not surprised, just softly amused. "I doubt I'm teaching anything." "You don't have to try," he said. "It's in the way you live." They went quiet again. Birds flew across the sky in soft patterns. The light around them dimmed slowly, like a curtain falling at the end of a quiet play. He thought for a while, then said something he hadn't fully said aloud before, not to anyone else, not even to himself. "I think I understand now why I've been drawn to you all this time." She didn't speak, but turned her face toward him, giving him space too. "Continue. It's not because you look a certain way. It's not because of anything you've said or done to impress me. It's not even something I can describe easily. But when I'm near you, I feel like I can breathe more easily. I don't feel the pressure to be anything more than I am. I don't feel like I need to talk all the time or be clever or act interesting. I just feel calm, safe, real." She looked down for a moment, then back at him. Her voice was quiet when she replied. "Maybe that's the best kind of connection." He nodded slowly. "Maybe it is." They sat there for a long time without speaking. The sky grew darker. The wind cooled slightly. A few people passed by, but it was as if they were in a separate space, a bubble of calm untouched by the world's hurry. He thought about how rare it was to meet someone who carried peace within them, and even rarer to be affected by it. Not many people change you without trying. Not many people teach you without speaking, but she had. She had shown him that life doesn't have to be loud to be meaningful, that you don't have to rush to be worthy. That peace isn't something you find outside, it's something you grow quietly, slowly, in the way you walk, speak, sit. And see, he realized in that moment that he didn't love her because she gave him attention or said the right things. He loved her way of being, her stillness, her presence. He loved how she moved through life gently, and how that gentleness made the world around her feel softer too. She stood up after a while, brushing some leaves off her lap. "I should go," she said kindly. "But this was nice." "It was," he replied. She gave him one last soft smile, then walked away at the same quiet pace. He didn't ask her to stay. He didn't try to stop the moment. He simply watched her leave, knowing that some people don't need to be held tightly to be appreciated. Some people are like the wind. You feel them when they pass, and they stay with you long after they've gone. He stayed on the bench until the sky turned dark. Lights flickered on around the park, casting small yellow glows on the path. He felt no sadness, just a deep calm, a deep gratitude for having met her, for having seen the kind of person he wanted to become, for having learned that love, or something close to it, can be simple, quiet, and steady. He knew then that he would always carry a part of her with him, not as a memory to hold on to, but as a way of living. In the way he slowed down, in the way he listened, in the way he noticed the small, quiet beauty in everyday things. That was her gift. That was what he had been drawn to all along. Not her face, not her words, but the peace she carried. And from that day on, whenever he walked through the park, or read a book in silence, or paused to help a stranger, or simply sat still with no purpose, he knew she had left a quiet mark on his life. A mark that didn't fade,